Obviously, questions were asked.
And several times, and it was tense. I've talked to a lot of people down there. You could feel it. I thought you held yourself well and your wife standing by your side and kids and everything else. But the tension in the room was obvious. The cameras would focus on people like Christopher Murphy when he didn't know the cameras were on him, and you could almost see the sweat on his brow. But there were times that the mayor wanted to step back to the microphone and challenge something you had said. Now, you told me when I talked to you yesterday, there's one matter of slight correction, but I don't think it even requires it because it's not material. But you made the statement you had not been able to talk to your police brothers. And in fact, what you were saying, and you told me yesterday, you're talking about some of the high-ranking officials that came to see you during the funeral time of your brother, that during the bereavement time, you'd had some communications with people. Of course, you probably were in shock like anybody would be at that point in time. But after that, about police business, you've been cut off.
I need to correct myself. I said that I hadn't spoken to anybody since Pat died, and I was mistaken when I said that. I meant to say that I hadn't spoken to anyone since we buried Pat on June the 6th. I had spoken briefly. I had called Ron Cook, and I think I'd spoken to Major Simmons, but I just thought it was strange that nobody was calling me. All of the people that had been coming to the house and calling me on the phone and, texting me.
Well, you later learned they were told not to talk to you.
I was told that.
And so when Mayor Strange went around this community for well over a week telling the entire community, but every morning I'd go on there talking about it to straighten out and get the truth out, but he continued to tell the public that you enjoyed I think his words were the privileges, the rights and privileges of the office. And I'll just ask you directly, during that time, did you enjoy the rights and privileges of being the police chief of Montgomery?
Well, I was on bereavement leave, Mark, and I, obviously wasn't coming down to the office. But when I returned to Montgomery, I did not go down there for several days. And I had my attorney with me when I went the first time.
Terry Love, very good attorney.
Again, as you just said a moment ago, it was a tense situation. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to encounter when I showed up at my office.
Now, I want to get this too, because I want to make sure, I've checked back. I talked to you yesterday. I thought I was going to have to make a correction to this audience. My sources continue to say that the information I've told the public are accurate, but let me get this out there. How many meetings occurred between you, the mayor, Christopher Murphy, or that team after you returned to Montgomery on the 11th or 12th? You returned on the 12th, I think, which was a Thursday.
There was one meeting on the 13th, which is Friday.
And that was the only meeting?
I had another meeting the following week, I think on Wednesday or Thursday, with the mayor. Kim Fell, the city attorney, was in the room with him, as was Terry Luck, my attorney.
And here's what I want to ask you, because I have told my audience, some of my information is that in one of the meetings, and you told me yesterday, one of the meetings occurred at your attorney's office. So it would not be that meeting. Is that the meeting on the 13th?
Yes.
All right, and that's a meeting who all attended that meeting?
Of course, the mayor, myself, Terry Luck, Director Murphy, Chief of Staff Brown, and Chief of Operations Cook.
Basically the leadership.
Yes, sir.
On law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And in that meeting on Friday the 13th, you were told you're not coming back.
That's correct.
And yet the public was being told that this was still to be determined, but it was pretty clear you were not going to be back as the police chief in command of the department.
It was very clear, and I asked 2 or 3 times if I could return. I would like to return, but he said it's not going to happen.
Were you given specific reasons on the 13th on why you would not return?
Nothing specific.
It's all this stuff about leadership, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. But I want to go to the second meeting that occurred. You said Todd Strange, Kim Fell, the city attorney, your lawyer, Terry Luck, yourself. Who else was in that meeting?
Just the 4 of us.
And where was that meeting?
At City Hall in the legal department's conference room.
Is that conference room wired or capable of being wired?
I don't know.
Do you know whether or not that meeting was recorded without your consent?
I don't know.
Is there anything about that meeting you're concerned the public knowing about?
Not at all.
And I'm going to continue to tell the audience, and folks, if, I can't drag everybody in, but I'm told that meeting was recorded and monitored. That they brought you into a meeting, which I'm trying to understand the motivation for that, Chief. The first you've heard of that was me saying it on the airwaves.
It was a follow-up meeting to the one that we had on the 13th. I guess finalizing the agreement about my administrative leave and when I would put in my retirement.
Was Christopher Murphy at that meeting?
No, sir.
And it was in the City Hall?
It was in the city attorney's conference room at City Hall.
And what was being presented to you?
Just tamping out, the final agreement as to my administrative leave and when I would put in my retirement and, ancillary issues concerning my departure from the MPD. We even asked at that point in time if the mayor would reconsider and allow me to come back, but he said no.
All right, let me go to legal issues for a moment, because when the term hostile work environment has been used, and I've done a little employment work, asked the folks at ASU, but a hostile work environment has a meaning to your average lawyer and your average employer about EEOC complaints dealing with race and sex and religion, national origin, etc. Has there been any EEOC complaint or any notice to you of anybody filing anything about a hostile work environment?
No.
Any suggestions that you've been sexually abusive to somebody or sexually harassed somebody or been racially discriminatory in some way?
No.
Then was that term used in the meeting with Kim Fell, the city attorney, who you've known a long time?
No.
Did the mayor, prior to the press conference, ever use that term hostile work environment?
I don't recall that he did.
What exactly did they tell you was the reason why you weren't coming back?
That there were leadership issues, and, the mayor called on Chief of Staff Brown, and John Brown said, well, Chief, sometimes the staff thinks that they can't talk to you. And he referenced a meeting.
Now, he's the second in command.
Right.
Did he ever have any problem talking to you?
No, we talked all the time. We just got back from San Francisco. We went to a convention, a police executive convention, and had some great times.
Was he with you on that? I'd actually talked to you when you were out there that Thursday.
Yeah, he was with me in San Francisco, yes.
And I've got to get this in. And this is kind of an odd time to get it in, but and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. You've been through a lot with your brother's death and all that. At any point in time, were you, Kevin Murphy, running any part of the investigation dealing with what your brother had been involved in?
No.
Who ran that investigation on that Monday night after Patrick, your twin brother, had the collisions?
Well, obviously I wasn't there. I left the scene. And I told Director Murphy that I was going to stay completely out of it, that I had told Pat that I would be there as a brother and love him and support him. But I told Pat that I advised my officers at the scene that night, do this by the book. Do not let the fact this is my brother influence your actions or your decisions. Do it by the book. Do you understand? And all of them said yes, they understood.
Did you have anything to do with the fact that Patrick was charged with a misdemeanor rather than what was later a felony?
No, sir. Can
you tell the audience who made that decision?
I don't, because I wasn't involved in the case. I don't know who made that call.
Thank you, sir. We'll be back on the Capitol Buzz. You get the feeling this is a courtroom today? I start it off with state your name for the record, please. Where do you work and what is your address? But I thought that might be a little ridiculous given the serious nature of this. Folks, this is extremely serious. The leadership of this city is at stake. These are people that have hundreds of millions of dollars under their control. They have the power to place you in jail, to give you traffic tickets that you were not driving the car on. I can go down the list. They can condemn your property and tear it down. The next three callers will weigh in on this. Ken, William Boyd, and Mr. William. And we'll let them talk to the police chief, and he still holds that title, Kevin Murphy, a good man who, in my opinion, has been smeared. Todd Strange, Christopher, the microphone is open for you. You can talk to me. You can talk to me. If you're lonely, you can talk to me. Kevin Murphy is my guest. He's the police chief in Montgomery. Don't forget our great sponsors at Brubaker Motors. They're on the Eastern Bypass. They have clear pricing. After 73 years, they've know what they're doing. Don Richter, Dick Brubaker, the great team there. Again, Mackenzie, if she is returning from camp, good gracious, she's having so much fun, she might not want to come back, but we're going car shopping when she gets back. We're headed to Brubaker Motors, and we're just going to look at this, what's on the car, and know that's the price for the car, which is a great way of doing it. Let me turn the witness, Kevin Murphy, over to the audience, because that's about what this has been like, hasn't it? You have a feeling I shifted into my other profession today. Ken, you're up with Kevin Murphy.
Morning, Mark.
Good morning, sir.
And good morning, Ms. Chief.
Morning.
Congratulations on your career, and obvious condolences from all of us for your and your family's loss.
Thank you very much.
I want to ask you about a statement that the mayor made, and that was that you as chief did not have the right or ability to enter a contract on behalf of the city. To me, with the obvious implication that you had overstepped your authority in some sort of contract, and it's apparent that it has to do with the relocation of the Christmas luncheon for the police department and the people that they honor and their guests. I'd like to ask, how many years have you handled that as chief? And this particular past year, was there any difference in the way it was handled other than relocation of the venue to a different restaurant? And I will hang up and respectfully listen to your answer.
Thank you. The Christmas luncheon and the Montgomery Police Department Police Memorial, Christmas luncheon in December, Memorial in May, have both been events that have been handled, or traditions, for the last 25, 30 years, as long as I've been a member of the Montgomery Police Department. And the police chief has always managed those events. And just like any organization, these events started to become bigger, attract more people. You know, we have more fallen officers today than we had 25, 30 years ago. So there are more widows and children of fallen officers that come, and then they bring a lot of friends and family with them. And so when at the previous venue, the Embassy Suites, and they're a fine organization, a very, very good management team, but we outgrew the venue. They could no longer accommodate the crowds that we were attracting because the department has grown and the events have grown. We could no longer remain at that location because the last year in 2011 that we had the police memorial at the Embassy, we had to have an overflow room where some of our guests couldn't even be in the main room where the memorial was going on. So I approached the director in the summer of 2012 and said, we need to evolve and grow and go to a different venue because we can no longer be accommodated by the Embassy Suite. So I asked permission to seek to go to the Renaissance. He said, fine. And we had discussions with the Renaissance on the venue, the cost, the food, the whole dynamic. And I shared all this with the director. It obviously was going to cost more because the crowds had gotten larger. And in order to rent a larger room, you're going to have to spend more money. And so I shared all this with the director, and he said, go ahead. And we entered into an agreement with the Renaissance to have these events at their location. These events have been going on for 25, 30 years. We just switched location.
This is what we call a red herring in the law. What them running you off had nothing to do with this.
I don't think so.
I mean, it is to even bring that up and try to suggest it, but it wasn't malfeasance. You know, it's been audited. I mean, it's how you say it. But I do want to go to this. I was looking through my Facebook messages and where I get my own private communications with people. One of the many ways I get information, and people will share a lot with me. And I do think this has to be out there. There is I'm going to call it an entourage, and that's a word used by others. But describe for the audience factually. Now, we did not have a public safety director before Chris Murphy.
Not since the 70s.
And I'll tell you, I supported the concept because I knew Todd Strange knew less about law enforcement than he did about telling the truth. And that's me speaking, not Kevin Murphy. And I thought, well, he needed a public safety director because how's he going to manage anybody? So this is the first time we've ever had a public safety director.
In quite some time.
Oh, they had one in the old days?
Yeah, in the 70s. There were public safety directors.
Jim Robinson days?
Mm-hmm. And even during the 50s and 60s, during the Civil Rights era, if you read
that worked out well for us.
Well, the director of public safety back then And if you read the history books and you read some of the cases, the lawsuits that were filed during the Civil Rights era.
L.B. Sullivan?
Yes. He was public safety director, and then you had Chief Rupenthal and Chief Stanley and Chief Lackey, and typically the
let me tell you guys why that name is historic. L.B. Sullivan was the public safety director, but he was New York Times versus Sullivan is one of the most famous cases dealing with the First Amendment and defamation, those type of things. But that's during the 60s and things that were published in the Montgomery Advertiser, and there's whole books written on it. But this is a recent. Bobby Bright didn't have a public safety director, and Emory Farmer didn't have one.
They did not.
Todd Strange went to this model. Now, I want you, for the audience, and you can disclose this to all of us, how large has that office grown to that Chris Murphy is running? Martha Earnhardt works there. She's retired from the Department of Public Safety. She's paid big bucks to be a communications director for Christopher. How many people are assigned to Christopher Murphy for this office that's been created?
Well, I mean, obviously, the man has to have a secretary. Bonnie Robinson's a wonderful lady. She used to be down at the police department, and I love her to death. And of course, he has an executive officer that's with him. It's a member of the MPD, a sworn member. And then
who is that? Is that Tanya now? That comes with the mayor?
Tanya's Lieutenant Thompson's with the mayor. Sergeant Burton is with Director Murphy. And they recently brought on Jerry Ann Miller, who's responsible for social media. That's her job.
And Martha Earnhardt.
Yes.
And you're leaving off the fact that he uses security personnel. He has a security assigned to him, what, 24/7?
Well, that's Sergeant Burton.
But it's not just him.
Well, they use other people, but I'm not going to get into the...
Well, you're not going to reveal security details because that's like a police no-no. But I am going to ask you this. Mm-hmm. Now, this is either comedic relief or there's a disorder here. Now, I'm going to ask you, does the public safety director actually have these assistants keep hand sanitizer with them? Is that a fact or not?
I've never seen it.
Do you think it's baloney or you think it's true?
I've never seen it. I've heard people talk about it, but again, I've never seen that.
All right, let me try it another way. Have you ever had members of the Montgomery Police Department complain to you about some of the places they were required to take the director?
Yes.
Did you receive complaints about this travel to football games and things of that nature?
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you, in your judgment, is that a proper use of city resources?
It's not left for me to say, Mark, and I'll tell you why. He was my superior, and I'm not going to question my chain of command. It's his judgment call, and he has to answer to it.
Spoken like a true soldier, and I'll ask a different way. Is that something you would do as police chief?
No.
I think you answered it. William Boyd will be up after this break. We're going to take another break, folks. Members of the media, WSFA and Alabama News Network, please take notes on the questions you should be asking these folks. You just don't open up the mic and turn them loose. This gentleman can stand any question posed to him, and I put allergy and asthma.